So every time I hear this gospel, it makes me think of the show Hoarders. Do you remember Hoarders? So people who hoard, if you don't know what hoarding is, they collect all sorts of stuff. Sometimes it's valuable, sometimes it's not. Some of you might look at the person next to you in the pew and be like, garage is full. Sometimes, like the television show showed us that sometimes they would compile so much that literally had to have like little pathways walking through, and they would sleep on piles of like newly bought clothes or, who knows, whatever it is. But you watch the show and ultimately they're trying to help that person come to a realization that this is unhealthy. And there might be other things behind it, and they clean up the house and they try to help them in this process, opening their eyes to this kind of movement of, I need this, I have to get it, right? I need this, I have to get it. And the reason why I think of that is because in the gospel, Jesus is speaking about these scribes and Pharisees wearing their long robes and getting money from the widows and basically just grasping for things, right? Prestige, honor, power, money. They just keep grabbing at things. And they're an easy target for the Lord to highlight because they're the ones that are supposed to be helping people in their path towards God, right? To live the faith out. And really what they're doing is just being pretty selfish, self-centered, disconnected. Their lack of self-awareness, and God is trying to bring them to that. But we have two people that are very aware of their situations and who they are. Today we have widows. They're both widows. The first reading, we hear about this widow that Elijah has come. Elijah's directed, he goes to the widow. And to recap, right, the widow says, I don't have enough to even feed us beyond this day, because he's looking for food. And Elijah tells her to have faith, to have trust, to go and make the food for him. And sure enough, as she does this, things are provided for, right? The flour jar doesn't go empty, the jug of olive doesn't run dry, and she stepped out in her poverty. She was very aware of her poverty and her inability to provide for her and her son. And yet, through the prophet Elijah, God provides for her. The second one, we have another widow. And Jesus is observing this collection offered at the temple, right? So we have to think of the temple in the first century. It was huge. The complex was huge, very public, lots of people there. And so they would come up to these things that almost looked like trumpets, these metal jars where they would drop their money in offering to God, right? They would give back their 10%. And so if you had a lot of money, imagine the sound that was making when you're dropping in these coins. And now juxtaposed to this widow who doesn't have much, right? She's got these two things. And I imagine this being like pennies. And you know how hollow they sound when you drop in. You can barely kind of hear them. And this is taking place. And the Lord is observing it. And he draws our attention, again, trying to help us kind of disconnect from that mentality of, I need this, I need this, I need this. And what does he say? The poor widow put in more than all the other contributors to the treasury. Why? He says, she from her poverty has contributed all she had, her whole livelihood. I mean, if we even look at ourselves, how many times do maybe we try to calculate things if we're giving to a charity or we're offering, our gift back to the church, and we kind of think through all the bills. We think through all the responsibilities. It can cause lots of anxiety at times, right? Like checking that credit card balance. Like we can get absorbed into that thing. Right? And this isn't to say to be irresponsible with our money, but what the Lord is seeing in that widow is she has great trust in God. That very act of giving back to God from her poverty is evidence of her faith, of her hope that God will provide. And the Lord does ask us to be mindful of that. So how do we give, right? Do we give in a spirit of fidelity to God and trusting that no matter what my anxieties are, God is going to take care of me? You notice, it doesn't say that the widow and with Elijah, that she had all of a sudden this super surplus. It's like she hit the lotto. No, she had everything she needed. And sometimes our perception of what we need is not reality. It's like the people who hoard, right? Like, I need this, I need this, I need this. We can get into whatever kind of like analysis of what's going on emotionally with them. But we actually do that in our lives, right? We even consume things at a rate like, I need this. I got to check my phone, right? I got to go and scroll. I got to look at this video or that. I got to watch this show. These are the kinds of things that we need the Lord's grace and we need to root out of our lives so that we're focused on the most essential. You see, when the widows were aware of their poverty, they were more open to God. And it doesn't matter how many zeros are in your bank account, you're just as poor as the next person when it comes to what we ourselves can do in our lives. Because all the stuff we get and gather and put in our bank accounts or in our garage, it's going to pass. Our souls are what's going to endure. So when someone doesn't have the material things, not always, but they have this opportunity to be more aware of the longing and the desire for God, right? That I have to trust radically. I'm invited to trust radically in God. The psalmist is a great kind of like refrain of what kind of perspective we should take, what kind of stance we should take. Psalm 146, that's what it was today. The Lord keeps faith forever, secures justice for the oppressed, gives food to the hungry, sets captives free, gives sight to the blind, raises up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the just, protects strangers, the fatherless and widow he sustains, but the way of the wicked he thwarts. Think about that. Like, God, I know you are going to provide. If we can make that, like, Lord, I trust you with this decision or with my family. Lord, I step out in faith. I trust you that no matter what happens, that you're with me. If we live like this, imagine like the alleviation of some of the anxieties that we cause for ourselves, right? That we get into that cycle. And then we don't have piles of things we have to work through because we're trusting that God is going to walk us through it, that he's going to take us through it, and that on the other end, things are going to be better than they are right now. Right? Not in an escapist way, but in a real way. So let's be aware of our own poverty, right? Like, what do I really have? Right? I need God. I need Jesus Christ. And when we're aware of that, amazing things can happen. St. Alphonsus Liguori says, he who trusts in himself is lost. He who trusts in God can do all things. When I was in Baltimore, this church, it was a black Catholic church, right? We don't really have black Catholic churches here, but very tradition from the very beginning, black Catholic churches. It runs deep. And it was in a poorer part of the city, St. Ambrose. And I know they didn't have a lot of money. I was there, and there were people who did that were in the parish, but it was this old church. It was a big complex. And I remember the Franciscan friar who was the pastor there walking me around telling me, he's like, look at that roof. I'm like, yeah, that looks really expensive, a slate roof. He goes, you know how he paid for that? I said, I don't know. He said, everybody here tithes 10% to the penny. He's like, and it's amazing. He's like, and then we needed this roof replaced, someone hit the lotto. And almost to the penny, their 10% gift paid for that roof. I mean, it was crazy. It was wild. And he's just talking about like it's normal. Like, yeah, God provided, right? Like, I'm not shocked and surprised that God came up with some other way to pay for it, right? That's not to say you're going to hit the lotto, so don't go buy lotto tickets right now. But God will surprise us in the ways that he takes care of us. So we step out in faith. There's this great litany. It's called the Litany of Trust. The Sisters of Life produced this, and I want to pray some of this with you. So when I say the phrase, whatever it is, you say, deliver me, Jesus. Got it? Okay. From the belief that I have to earn your love, deliver me, Jesus. From the fear that I am unlovable, deliver me, Jesus. From the false security that I have what it takes, deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of trusting you will leave me more destitute, deliver me, Jesus. From all suspicion of your words and promises, deliver me. From the rebellion against childlike dependency on you, from refusals and reluctances in accepting your will, from anxiety about the future, from resentment or excessive preoccupation with the past, from restless self-seeking in the present moment, from disbelief in your love and presence, from the fear of being asked to give more than I have, from the belief that my life has no meaning or worth, from the fear of what love demands, and from discouragement,